Welcome back to the Pre-Vetted podcast, where we spotlight extraordinary people and remarkable talent reshaping our world. Today, we're joined by Travis Pomposello. He's a media and creative leader with a career that spans MTV, Nickelodeon, The Late Show with David Letterman, Discovery, and more. He co-founded Epix, now MGM Plus, and later built Bella Vista Creative into a 5 million agency, working with major brands like Netflix and Amazon. Today, Travis mentors agencies through Creative Agency Accelerator, helping them scale from K to 5 million a year. And he writes about creative leaderships and sustainable excellence in the CCO's journal. Travis, welcome to the show.
Hey, Federico, great to be here. Thank you.
I'm honored to have you here today. So let's start by what is the biggest lesson you've learned about building a great career?
That's a big question with a big answer. And it's changed, right? This has changed historically, and it is changing more and more every day. I can speak about myself. What was different for me was different than, say, our parents' generation. In those days, if you wanted to build an excellent career, you went to school, you got in on the ground floor in a corporation, and you grew with the company as your skills progressed, and you went up the ladder. And hopefully by the time you were retiring, you were an executive, you had a nice pension, and you moved to someplace warm, and this was it. And that was considered an excellent career. For me, like all of us today, we came into a time where corporations were not rewarding people staying in the same company for these long, this full career span anymore. Technology started growing at a geometric pace, if you will, which started to provide more and more opportunities and much more change inside of the organizations. We had many companies that started out as one thing, but because of technology grew into being something different. You can think about that with all the computing companies, all the digital companies that maybe started as analog companies and then became, I think of like Hewlett Packard starting with, typewriters and things like this. What builds an excellent career now more than ever, but also in my career, was being able to identify those changes in your industry and being willing to take a risk to pivot with them as opposed to resist them, and staying in the mindset of, oh, this is the comfortable place, how we always did it. This is the comfortable place about the way that things get done, versus moving with the change and being willing to adapt to that change. And we see it now more than ever with careers that are being changed, whether we like it or not. And I know half the world is against and half the world is for AI, but it's definitely changing how we're looking at everything. And the people who are willing to adapt and change along with these changes, because it's not going away. I wish maybe it was for some folks, but it's not. And being able to incorporate that, being able to take that risk, is what's going to make a great career 2026 and beyond.
Right. Yeah, the company man, the career path you described,
Right.
was something that in the 50s, 60s, maybe 90s,
Yeah,
was
it was.
a big thing, right? But now the pace changed, and that dynamic, the reward, benefit balance doesn't add up anymore, right? So people change jobs more often, right? And companies need to adapt, which means that they need to hire and fire faster than before.
And now it's on to the person, the individual, not being risk adverse, maybe like those generations were in the past. They stayed in those careers, became that company person, that company man or woman. Now it's managing your own career, being, in a sense, being your own company and looking for those opportunities, having the willingness to explore them, perhaps even leaving companies and, exploring those new things. That doesn't mean you don't have to build your skills. It doesn't mean you don't have to work hard. It doesn't mean any of those things. But what it means is what I'm saying is a rigid mindset or a fixed mindset is not going to grow a great career. It has to be a very open and very fluid mindset.
Right. And the AI change is here to stay.
Here to stay.
So either we adapt or we perish, right?
That's right. But it can very much be used to your advantage. There's many applications where it can be used to your advantage. I think I've said it to you in our conversations, and I've said it in the press. My biggest fear about AI is not AI itself. It's somebody who's great, somebody who's super talented, somebody who's a real powerful thinker who uses AI versus the person who is all those things and doesn't use AI. I think we know what's going to happen there. The person who is using it to amplify all their great skills is going to go by leaps ahead of the person who is could be extremely or equally or even more talented without AI than the other person, but they're going to fall. They're going to fall behind. I think that's the part that I fear are for those individuals who don't, bring that into their ecosystem.
But then I talk about this on a lot of episodes where there is this synthetic everything, fake AI generated videos, you know, AI generated content that it's not fake, it's synthetic, right? It's not real, and then people look to have real conversations, and that's where I think that in that situation having this type of human to human conversations becomes much more relevant, right?
Absolutely. I couldn't agree with you more. It is incredibly important. When I think of, we think about, a big part of my world coming from the creative side of whether that be software development, whether that be advertising or marketing or branding. If we put AI on the side, we still have a commitment to excellence, whether that be creative excellence, coding excellence, you know, you name it. If using AI is the tool to get there, bravo. If AI is there to make it fast and to commoditize excellence, as you said, that becomes the thing that is just what everyone is calling AI slop, right? There is no human in there. There is no judgment. There is no conviction behind it. It's just pushing buttons and getting an output as opposed to being a participant in that output. Again, having these conversations like you and I are having, or for somebody who's looking to go back to growing their career, who would go on a podcast and speak, right? No AI here, right? Maybe in time that'll get replaced. You and I will be, AI avatars, doing this podcast for us. But until that happens, speaking engagements, podcasts, YouTube, phone calls, video meets, that three-dimensional interaction between humans is very important to be able to further a relationship. Otherwise, it's sort of two AI agents speaking with one another, and that does not move anything further. It just is exactly what it is. And it becomes very commoditized conversation, if you will, as opposed to, you and I came to this podcast together with a commitment to creating something excellent for your viewers. If we didn't have that commitment, we would just let two AIs create a commodity piece of programming to put out there on the internet.
Right, right. And I think that is the game changer for me and the audience, because for me, I mean, for us, right, we have to be 100% engaged on this conversation, and we are overstimulated by notifications, emails, the phone rings, or we get messages all the time, and ads. In all that process, we get lots and lots of ads, and that's without counting our intrusive thoughts that our mind kind of is overflowing with ideas, right? So in that busy environment, right, um, having the to kind of stop the world and be able to focus on one thing, for us, it becomes an important endeavor, right?
Agreed. And if you allow me to go on a little bit of a tangent and put a little bit of a challenge out there, what you're speaking about, especially with all the notifications and all the things and, quick instant gratification with AI answers and these type of things versus something like you and I are participating in right now. Something I think about a lot is, and I try to manage for myself, is my inputs, my cognitive load, if you will. And in that, the challenge here is spend 1 hour talking to another human, like you and I are doing right now, versus spending 1 hour scrolling on TikTok or pick your favorite social media platforms and see what your level of fatigue is at the end of that 1 hour mentally. And I'd be willing to take the bet that you're not feeling as fatigued from a conversation as you are after doom scrolling for an hour across social media apps. And that's because of your cognitive load. So much input, so much input, so much input. When you're in a conversation with another human, you're very focused on that other person. You're taking input, you're having output. There's no instant gratification. You're waiting for the answer. You're thinking of your reply, and that's not as exhausting by any stretch. Even though it feels like more work, it's far more exhausting.
Yeah, it's for me, having the focus requires a lot of effort compared to scrolling, but the gratification that I have at the end is much higher because I felt like I accomplished something, right? Whereas on the doom scrolling, you get into this numbness, right?
Right. Right.
It's similar when you watch TV, right? You watch TV for a lot of hours, then you turn it off and you feel numb, right? And you feel
Correct. Agreed.
empty inside, right? Yeah. And I think the same thing happens. There is a diminishing returns for everything, right? You know the story about the strawberries, right?
No, tell me.
So if you have an infinite amount of strawberries, right? You can enjoy the first one, you're going to enjoy it very much, right? The second one, a little bit less, and so on and so forth, until eventually it becomes a chore, right? So, change strawberries with ice cream or whatever thing we like, right? Eventually, we don't enjoy it anymore, right? So, I'm trying to drink less, and when I stopped drinking for 4 or 5 days, the first beer I enjoyed very much, but then after that, I can drink more and more and more, and it's I get drunk, but I don't enjoy it anymore, right?
Right. Right.
And then I'm thinking, why? It doesn't make sense, right? So I realize I can make the choice of the first one, but then the second one, the third one, you kind of go with the flow, and you drink more than you should. Well, I drink more than I should, right? So but the first one, it's so good, it's so nice that eventually I go back and I keep drinking more, right?
Of course. Uh,
Right. So, what do you wish someone told you in your 20s?
Oh, there's a lot of things, but we'll go back to thinking about it career wise. And something that I wish somebody told me was when I think about the two paths that I was on in my 20s, and I think most young people are in their career, is that you're developing skills, but you're also developing your taste and your judgment for whatever your job is, right? For whatever it is, the field that you're in that you want to move forward. But those two things develop at different rates. For me, I developed my skills very quickly, but I was slower with my taste and my judgment. And but I wanted the promotion. I wanted the thing, and I couldn't understand. I'd ask for it and say, but I'd be skilled at all these things, and I know how to do all these things better than everybody else. And the boss would say, "No, you need a little more." And what I wish it would have been said to me is, you're still developing, your ability to have sound judgment, to have, to really be better at this craft and take full advantage of your skills. This part still needs to have maturity. I've seen it happen the other direction too. This was just my particular story. I've seen people have incredible taste, incredible judgment, but very sloppy skills, and it also is lopsided. So, to answer your question clearly, is I wish they just told me to slow down and understand that some things grow slow and some things grow in leaps, and there will come a time where they will even out, and that's when you'll be headed more towards, having true domain expertise over your craft.
I remember when I was 15, demanding the promotion for a managerial job, right? And a managerial position, right? And when I when I was hearing you, I recall that story, and I had the same issue, right? I mean, I was really good on the skill side. On the maturity side, I was still a teenager, right? And then I didn't know what I didn't know.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So can you tell us a little bit more about your business? What are you doing now on mentoring and helping leaders?
Sure. So about a little over a year, a little more than a year ago, I started mentoring creative agency owners, digital agency owners, having had the experience of being a buyer in corporate. And thank you for that introduction where you laid out a lot of that. And then I went and started my own agency, which was very successful at first, because I had the gravitas of coming out of the C-suite and big media, and everybody wanted to work with me because I was the new kid and I built this new agency and I, had all these relationships. But quickly, 6 months to a year, that no longer was working. Right? I wasn't the new kid anymore. I'd kind of gone the cycle. Everyone worked with me, and it hit me one day like a ton of bricks. I didn't know how to do sales. I didn't know how to operate an agency. I know how to operate a television network, but I didn't know how to operate, an agency and all those other pieces that go along with that, hiring people, infrastructure, payroll, you name it, right? All these things. I just duplicated what had happened in corporate, but it no longer was working because now I was running my own company. And I had to really dig deep inside of myself and asked myself, why did you buy, Travis, why did you buy from Federico when you were the buyer? Right? Why did you buy from so and so when you were the buyer? What were those relationships like? What were those things like? What were the things about those companies that you as an executive gave you the trust to essentially take a risk with your career, with your job? Right? If you hire an agency for a lot of money and that agency is poorly run, even if they're talented and they fail, it could cost you your job. So what gave me that comfort? What gave those things? And I systematized that for my agency. And when I exited my agency, I had a lot of peers and friends who had their own agencies that asked me, could you teach me those things? Because those are the areas that I still struggle with. And you are really great at that. So that started in a sense, me working in a fractional capacity. From a pure business point of view, I wasn't able to scale this because, can only work like a part-time employee for so many people. And what I discovered also inside of that fractional time was that what founders were really looking for was a mentor. And what they were looking for in a mentor was somebody who had that experience on both sides, somebody who had been there before, somebody who got it, and somebody that they could see themselves in and wanting that partnership or that mentorship or that advisement, if you will. So I started working in that capacity. Being a strong believer in education, I built a curriculum around it where, I filmed course material. I know in today's marketplaces, we talk about commodity courses have become a little commoditized. So that's why I add a mentoring layer to it and I add a community layer to it in order to round out the curriculum offering and make it more bespoke. And that's how I do it. And I have a great community, small community, which I'm very happy to have that around because it gives me the ability to be more hands-on with maybe with less people, but again, more hands-on, and that's more gratifying for me. And that really ties into my motivation of doing it is I want to be that hands-on. I want to work with a small amount of people. And that really translates into the founders that I work with these agency founders that I work with who are want to stay very close and tapped into their intrinsic motivation for doing what they do, aside from making money. Or it's easy for us to say, I want to make money, but that's not really the reason anyone starts their agency. That's a byproduct. And yeah, so that's something that I'm very bullish on with the founders I work with, but it's a two-way street with I'm staying intrinsically motivated to wanting to raise founders up as their mentor, and they're getting more back in touch with their intrinsic motivation. So that's the capacity that I work, and it's been, like I said, creative agencies of all different kinds, digital agencies of all different kinds from all around the globe and bringing all that together is I think sometimes I'm the one being mentored because I'm getting to hear the stories of all these different founders and all these different people, and I'm able to connect all those stories into methodology and into systems that then I can share as a whole. I get to sort of test, validate, and iterate every day by talking to 4 or 5 different or more agency owners a day. So I can constantly test and validate my own hypothesis of, my learnings, putting them into action, getting that feedback, and then tailoring them for every scenario. So that's what I'm up to now.
That's amazing. I mean, the everybody needs a mentor, right? Or everybody
Of
needs
course.
support, right? And that guidance, right? And running an agency has so many parts that it's challenging. It's not easy. And now you can participate in many agencies without getting involved, on the day-to-day operations, without getting bogged down by the details, right? Although you get involved in the details, but what I'm trying
I
to
do.
say is
I
that
I
the
I, w- I wish
operations, right?
I wish I could agree with you, but I do get myself very involved. That's one of the things that I have to work on, and I work with a mentor still. Like I said, it's very important, and I think it's very important to have that. One of my things that I'm developing still is getting too deep into it, too attached, maybe over delivering. I write about that all the time, in my journal. But it's very fun, and it's very gratifying, and couldn't be happier doing that. It's also been really incredible in this work to having been in the corporate side for so long and being able to say to agency owners, if this is not an us versus them situation, right? In the same way that we want, buyers at corporations to have empathy for us and our struggles, we have to have it for them. As I mentioned, their jobs are on the line, right? They have families, they have careers, they have bosses. They have a lot of things that go into hiring the agency that, as agency founders, we often forget. We want to, why don't they trust me? Why don't they hire me? Why don't they get back to me? Why don't they, and it could be so many different things that have nothing to do with you, right? It could be their child could be in a football tournament or a soccer tournament, that, or they're on, something like their mom is ill and they had to travel, and it had nothing to do with the founder, but we're sitting there like I'm being ghosted and they're not getting. So being able to bring those stories through my mentorship about what life is like on the other side for an executive has also been very gratifying, because I would love to break down this mentality of this us versus them situation. And there is a part of that on the corporate side where corporate leaders are often felt like, oh, I'm always being sold to, I'm always being sold to, I'm always being sold to. So I'm always pushing creating these genuine relationships between the two sides so that we can break that down. And again, my work gets to do that.
You can bring a level of empathy that neither the founders or the corporate employees uh, know about, and you can provide the insights because you've been on both sides.
Right. Right. It's really nice to be able to do that.
Right, right. Yeah. Uh, and and now you have the opportunity to be on multiple companies, multiple agencies at the same time, right? Yeah. I interviewed a guest. Her name is Elisa Camajort Page, and she talks about optionality, which is this concept of fractional roles, right? And being able to, rather than working on one company, working on multiple companies, right? On a fractional level, right? But I think you're taking that to the next level, which is being part of the organization as a coach, as a mentor, as an assistant to the founders, so they can build greater companies.
Right. And it gets wonderful that you reference that, because as founders, I'm guilty of this as well. We start to be in an echo chamber with ourselves or with our teams, and it just starts to become this circular conversation. Being able to get outside of that is, I always see founders grow from that. Just have somebody who's just not going to automatically agree because they write them a paycheck every week, and not getting perhaps negative feedback from the market when they're not getting replies to outreach messaging, or they're not getting closing deals, or they're in tough negotiations all the time around pricing, and they just start to have this feedback loop that's going round and round and round. Great to really be able to like, no, come on, let's get out of that cycle. Let's talk about that. It's not you, right? It's something totally different.
Right, right. I've seen recently responses where, I follow up with people after many months of no communication, and then they say, "Oh, sorry, life went through, and I kind of forget to reply to you," right? So as you said, it's nothing personal. It's that they're just busy with other things, right?
No, it's not. It's not. And, I'll add one more thing to that was personal for me, and I know it's true for other people on the side of corporate, is when there's a delay in responding, right? I'll give you this as an example. I meet you on this podcast. We have a nice time. There's a potential for us to work together. You send me a message. I'm busy that day. Maybe I didn't have the best day at work and someone's not happy with me and I'm distracted or something's going on at home and I don't respond to your email. The next morning I come to work and my email box is full and Federico's down here, but I want to get back to Federico. I really had a nice time. Like this was great. I like him. I want to get back to him. I'm too busy. I don't get back to him. Day 3, further down, and I'm unable to get back. Day 4, Federico sends me a follow-up. "Hey, Travis, we had such a nice time. I haven't heard back from you. I just wanted to see, now I feel guilt. Oh, I really like Federico and I haven't gotten back to him. He's probably upset with me. He had me on his podcast. I should really get back to him. Oh, I don't know what to say. Someone's at my door. I have another meeting. This thing goes on. Now we go to day 7. Hey, Travis, I'll leave you alone. I just want to check in one last time. Make sure everything's okay. The podcast is going live. Here's this, I'm trying to be, you're trying to be useful to me. And I'm sitting there going like, I'm so embarrassed. I don't know what to say. I really enjoyed myself. And then I make a decision. Then that decision gets made. I write back and I own it, or I just hit delete to get rid of my guilt. And this happens all the time on the corporate side. And it has nothing to do with the agency owner or the salesperson, the BDR or the SDR who's reaching out. This happens more times than any executive wants to admit.
Right, right. And then on the side of the agency owner, they feel lack of response
Ghosted.
as ghosted.
Right.
Yes,
Yeah. Yeah.
and then they're wondering why that happened, and then they start spinning out a lot of thoughts, negative thoughts. I
Yep.
am not good enough. I am not.
Right.
My service is not good enough. Right. There's so
Right.
many
Exactly.
things like
Yeah.
that. Right.
Either make it personal, it's about you, or you start redoing your offer, you start redoing your pricing, you start thinking about your marketing's maybe wrong, and you start doing all these things. And it really was nothing more than another human being going through life. And it was none of those things at all. So bravo to the people who write back to you, you know, hi Federico, I'm sorry, life got in the way. Let's start back. Let's start over again. Forgive me. Those are executives you should continue to have relationships with because they're
Right. And then on the side of the executives, I can understand that they are overwhelmed with so many service offerings all the time, right?
options, service offerings, simple little things in the office that can cause a wrinkle. Somebody resigns to go work someplace else and now they have to hire a new person, right? HR decides there's going to be a restructure or a CFO decides to like, hold up, we're analyzing the books. Don't spend any money, right? We're in a freeze and all these things, can cause these inactions. So, as I say all the time to agency owners, it's our job as agency owners to gently remind prospects, clients, old and new, that we exist. It's not their job to remember us, but in a way that doesn't make them feel guilty. And guilty looks like I've sent you 3 messages, or I'm trying you again, or I haven't heard back from you, or just checking in, right? This makes the person feel guilty. But if it's framed more, and I don't want anyone to use this as language, but if it's framed with the sentiment of, you're busy, I know things run away, I know things get away. Just want to remind you that I'm here and I'm your friend, and I understand. Would love to work together. Sentiment that goes much further. No one who's made to feel guilty wants to engage. And simple language around that, like just checking in, for example, was one that always made me feel guilty because I was like, oh, I wanted to be back. I meant to I forgot. Now, and so that one always made me feel guilty.
Right. Right. And it's always green on the other side, right? Of the
Of
fence.
course.
I mean, I've seen a lot of people on corporations that have a lot more red tape to go through compared to small
Yes.
agency owners where they have more, less stability but more freedom, right? So I can see also an executive saying, "Well, I'd rather be an agency owner, right?"
You're speaking to one who left a corporate career to start an agency. So 100%. And a decision I don't regret whatsoever. But yes, the grass is always greener. And there were many times I'd be lying if I didn't tell you that there were many times as an agency owner, I was like, I should just get a job. I should just shut this thing down and go back and get a job. And like you said, there's plenty of people in corporate like, I should open an agency, right? So the grass is always greener.
Right.
We're all the same at the end of the day.
My my parents used to work on corporations as well, and their joke around that was, I should just put a grocery store, just sell vegetables. Life is so simpler, right? Which, is not necessarily true, but it's this idea of, I don't want to have anything to do with corporate anymore, right?
It sounds
Yeah.
like the dream sometimes, doesn't it?
But they stay there for a while. And then, but the issue is that they would arrive late at night because the commute was challenging in Buenos Aires. So they decided to leave the corporate world so they could spend more time with me and my brother.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Again, right, going back to intrinsic motivation, if you will, right? That was their intrinsic motivation, and good for them, and good for you.
Yeah, I mean, we were able to spend more time with them, right? So
Wonderful.
that was amazing. And I think it's important to talk a little bit more about intrinsic motivation. You mentioned it a few times already. Can you expand on that concept?
I sure can. I sure can. And you asked about how I work with founders, so it is tied to that. As mentioned, right? Every agency founder I've ever met has developed their skills. They've developed their judgment. They have their craft, let's call it. And that's almost always the intrinsic motivation for wanting to start an agency. I have my craft. I'm a master of my craft. I want to bring it to market and I want to build a company around it. And I want to be my own person and I'm my own company. And yes, and the byproduct is making money, but also being able to use their craft to make something, whatever that might be. Could be writing code, could be, creating graphics, it could be doing video or photography or, AI video or whatever that craft might be. And that's why they start their agencies. What I see happen is when the pressure comes on, when the agency has to do sales, has to build systems and operations, we start to drift further away from our intrinsic motivation and we start to move into operations and operating and sales and these things. And it tends to dilute the positioning of the company. And the positioning becomes more sales focused and less about that craft, that intrinsic motivation, the whole reason the founder did it in the first place. They know because I went through this. And again, saying the people who I bought from were very tied to their intrinsic motivation with their agency. And when we would go into, let's say, a negotiation situation where they were proposing me work and I had a lot of questions as a buyer, the agency owners who were tied to that intrinsic motivation could talk with me for hours if I wanted to about the process, the price, the people, the judgment, all their conviction, everything. The ones who had lost sight of that and were more interested in the monetization and the economics of selling me the project would fizzle out in that conversation rather quickly because they would run out of answers because it wasn't coming from here. It was coming from all in here and they were not the ones that I hired. And even for my own self with my agency, when I had times where it was becoming more here, like I need to close this project. I have salaries to pay, I have payroll, I have rent, I have all these things. I wasn't able to necessarily defend the work or my hypothesis or my thesis to the potential buyer in the same way. I would almost run out of energy, run out of gas. And when I got tied back into my intrinsic motivation from why I started the agency in the first place, like I said, I could go on and on and on about it. And I see this all the time. In knowing you, I see it when we talk about this with, software development and engineering and these type of things. You're so intrinsically motivated about about that craft. We could spend all day talking about it. But if we started talking about something that was off that line, it would be a short conversation. So I'm always pulling founders back to that, pulling myself back to that, because it's the truly the without getting too woo about it, but it is the place of power because you built your domain expertise there, and you chose to create an agency to be able to bring it to life and to monetize it to take care of your life. There's no shame in monetization of something you're good at, but when we start just doing it for monetization's sake, it becomes something totally different.
Right, right. I mean, monetization is the means, but the end is the intrinsic motivation,
Correct. Correct. And
right?
you'll always be better at it. You'll always be better at it if it's intrinsically tied to it.
If you do it the other way around, then you're taking shortcuts and have a short lifespan.
Right. We have these conversations, right? Federico, I have $1 million idea. Right. And it starts with the monetization versus someone who comes to you and says, I want to build or I want to make or I want to design this thing. And then later on is like, and I think it's $1 million idea. That's fine, but it's two different things, isn't it? What's much more interesting, even for you on the other side of that conversation, to listen to, and what's easier for that person to speak about, right? That's when I speak about intrinsic motivation. That's where I'm driving to.
By having a clear understanding of your intrinsic motivation allows you to pursue the dream regardless of the weather outside, right? Whether it's,
Yeah, cool, good point.
things are doing great, things are going bad, it doesn't matter. The motivation remains. And I think that's the power of that.
Agreed. Agreed.
And the other reason to hire founders like that is that they're not going to take shortcuts. They're going to deliver based on the values that they have. And whether that's a business or not, I mean, they put the mission over the profits.
Right. The profits come if you do that.
Right. Right. For me, the intrinsic motivation it's about seeing the impact on the people, right? Whether they are in my organization or not, right? Or whether they continue working with me or not, or whether it's on the client side or they already left the client, right? But seeing how much we affect them and they affect us, and that relationship, and being able to be, well, I call it being a bad influence, right? But it's basically this idea of, just encourage people to go for it, right? Go the extra mile, you can do it, right? You want to travel, how can I help you make it happen? You want to buy a car or a motorcycle or whatever adventure you want to be, right? I am the little devil on the shoulder that says, yes, you can
That's
do
great.
it.
Yeah, I think that's beautiful. That's wonderful, and that's great. Purpose, if you will. But
Right.
that really translates. And I know your business. That I see that, and anyone that looks at your materials or your website, you see that in the positioning of how you speak about the service. You're out there providing in the marketplace. It translates across, and then it also translates into your team, and it translates into the quality of work. So perfect through line of what we're talking about.
So, Travis, we're running out of time. I truly
Okay.
appreciate you being here today. Any final remarks before we wrap it up?
Final remarks. Well, I think what I would say as a final remark would be, well, let's go back. I want to go back to what we were speaking about, excellence versus commodity. And in this time where all industries are being impacted or feeling fearful around changes in technology, right? This geometric progress that we're seeing right now in our time. If I leave a final remark or piece of advice or a piece of wisdom is, well, it seems so new and so different it is history repeating itself. We've seen these things before. I joke if we hadn't adapted with technology over the course of time, we'd all still be, living in caves, afraid of fire, or maybe on bread lines to get food, or not having to store groceries for the week, have to get them all these things that seem very scary. I understand this feels very, very scary. But if you stay committed, stay intrinsically motivated to your craft, using sound judgment, being very intentional with what you're creating, whatever that is, and you're using this new technology as a tool, not as a replacement, not to create slop as you spoke of, not letting it commoditize you, because you can't commoditize judgment. You can't commoditize, those things. You may be able to commoditize some skills, you'll be able to accelerate some skills, but never going to be able to commoditize taste and judgment or a commitment to excellence or that conviction. So my closing thoughts are on that is don't lean into that. Don't lean into the fear of the change. And there's a million situations that I'm sure everyone can find in their lives around this. I will tell two before we depart in my own life is my father was a musician. When synthesizers and drum machines and sampling came, was the sky was falling. He was going to be replaced. And he was, distraught. And then I fast forward a couple of years, and he's sitting in a home studio with a sampler and a synthesizer and a guitar on his lap, and he had adapted all the technology. And I said to him, "Dad, what are you doing?" He's, "Oh, I'm able to do demos now all by myself. I can make more quality. I can figure out my ideas." And it was a progression. That was very scary for him in the beginning. In my own life, when I was a writer and I went to work for David Letterman, was the time when spell check on Microsoft Word was becoming very good, and everybody was using it. And the people who were older than me and who had been writers for a long time still had thesauruses and dictionaries, stacked on their desks or on the bookcase behind them, and they would criticize me and make fun of me about using spell check. And they would make jokes to me like, "Oh, I put your name in spell check, Pomposello, and it corrected it to pimples," and they'd have ha 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 and have me on the back and all these things. And, in due course, they all started using spell check. The thesauruses and the dictionaries got dusty. But in both those cases, my father and those writers, they were still executing a high level of judgment, a high level of taste, a high level of craft. They didn't just go to commodity like, "Oh, I'll just type a bunch of misspelled words and let, the spell check fix it." My father wasn't like, "I'll just let the machine compose the song." They still brought their talent to it. They used the technology to amplify their talent and their judgment and their taste. So that's my parting words from this conversation today.
Thank you very much for joining us today.
Thank you, Federico. It's always wonderful to talk with you.